Every ancient civilization speaks of a time when the world nearly ended. The seas rose, the cities vanished, and 7 wise men appeared to rebuild what was lost. In India, we have known them for thousands of years. The Sapta Rishis, 7 sages who guided humanity after the flood. Their names are still remembered. Vashishta, Atri, Bhardwaj, Vishwamitra, Gautam, Jambadini, Kashyap. Their stories never died here. It's been told again and again, from the Rig Veda to the Puranas. But thousands of miles away, archaeologists found something strange. An ancient clay tablet from Sumer. They discovered a list of kings who ruled before the flood. And right beside them, the 7 sages. The same number, the same mission, to bring back knowledge after the world reset. In Egypt, it happens again. The Shemsu-Hor, the followers of Horus, 7 priests of light, who rebuilt the kingdom after a cataclysm that nearly erased it. 7 teachers, 3 civilizations, all talking about an age that ended in water. And while we read these stories, something real started to surface from the ground. On a hill in Turkey, archaeologists uncovered Gobekli Tepe, a temple buried 12,000 years ago. The carvings there show signs of a world that existed before the flood. Exactly the world that these civilizations were describing. So who were these 7 sages? Were they really men who survived the cataclysm, or memories of something even older? A lost civilization that passed its knowledge to the next stage. Because the story of the 7 sages doesn't belong to one land. It appears again and again across the world. From Sumer to Egypt, from Andes to Himalayas. The question is, what were they trying to preserve? When the first Sumerian tablets were read, everyone expected numbers, grain counts, trade, temple ration. Then a set of lines show that didn't fit any leisure. 7 names, 7 teachers. The Apkallu. These lines came from Urk, list of kings, and sages, and Eridu Genesis. Texts that mix history with something older than history. The scribes said the 7 lived before the flood. Not kings, not gods, teachers sent by Enki from the deep Abzu to bring order to chaos. They even list their names one by one. Uan, the first teacher, the one who brought writing and law. Uan Duga, the priest who taught ritual and order. Enmeduga, the judge who taught ethics and fair rules. Enme Galama, the architect who showed humans how to build temples and cities. Enme Buluga, the craftsman who worked with metal and fire. An Elida, a stabilizer who kept peace and balance in the land. Tu Abzu, the last sage, said to be born from the deep, who warned of the coming flood. 7 names, 7 skills that together sound less like legend and more like the blueprint of civilization itself. The tablets say their leader rose from the sea each day to teach and returned to the water each night, not as a god handing down commandments, as a sage teaching writing, law, measures, and how to build. Here's the part that turns the story into a problem. The same scribe who recorded tax and star positions used the same careful script to record a time before history. They kept 2 lists, a list of kings before flood, each paired with a sage, and then when the waters receded, a new list, kings after the flood, but no sages beside them, and the sages were gone. Then the world started again. After that, the text switched from divine teachers to human scholars, Ummanu, mortal scribes who try to keep the system running. It feels like a handover, as if originals vanished and maintenance crew took over. So why list any of this on clay at all? Why bake it, seal it, and bury it like a law? Unless the memory mattered more than opinion. 7 names, 7 skills. A city that remembers before it was born. And if Sumer was a chapter of the first civilization, how does it remember a prologue? Sometimes I wonder what really we are losing today. Because if the ancient world left blueprint to rebuild civilization after a flood, what blueprint are we leaving behind? That thought actually connects to something real that's happening right now. A friend of mine is working on a project to help children build the kind of emotional strength our ancestors once built through stories and rituals. It's an app designed to teach kids emotional balance, mindfulness, and self-esteem. Through science-backed activities, that feels like a play. They're running a short survey for parents. No data, no signups. Just honest answers that'll help shape it before its launch. So if you're a parent or even someone who cares about how the next generation grows up in this chaotic digital world and you want your kids to be ready for the real world, click the link in the description or the pinned comment after this video and take a minute to fill it out. Because maybe preparing the next generation is the modern version of what the seven sages once did. Well, alright, back to the story. Because when Sumer fell silent, another land began to speak. A land that called itself Kemet, the Black Earth. And just like Sumer, Egypt said civilization did not start with them. They said that they were taught. Their oldest priest spoke of a forgotten age, a time when the Nile first rose after a great flood. And seven men, the Shemsu-Hor, the followers of Horus, came from the west to rebuild what was lost. They were called the Shining Ones, masters of writing, medicine, and architecture, the keepers of what Egypt called Sapta Tepe, the first time. And what was that first time? The temple of Idfu and Dendera describe it as an age that ended in water, a flood that wiped out the island of Egg, a sacred homeland where gods once lived among men. After the flood, the seven Shemsu-Hor appear restoring balance, founding the first cities and aligning their temples with stars. And here's the strange part. Just like Apkallu of Sumer, the Shemsu-Hor, they aren't gods, they are teachers. They carry titles like Architect of Heaven, Keepers of Numbers, Healers of Flesh. They pass down geometry, medicine, astronomy, the building blocks of a new world. Even the temple of Idfu preserves fragments of their stories. It speaks of the seven sages who planned the temple of Egypt, measuring with ropes, drawing with stars. In those walls, mythology reads like memory. And what's more, Egypt's entire calendar resets right around the same time. Sumer's flood legends begin around 11,600 years ago, the very end of the Younger Dryas, when the planet's ice melted and sea level rose more than 100 meters. So both Sumer and Egypt remember the same event, but from two sides of the world. And both say their knowledge came after the flood. Maybe this is a coincidence. Maybe it's the same story retold in different tongue. But what if it's something else? What if they both inherited the same memory? Because while Egypt was building its temples on land, another site was already waiting, buried in stones, older than both of them, as if preserving the blueprint they were rebuilding from. And that site is Gobekli Tepe. In the hill of southern Turkey lies Gobekli Tepe, a site 12,000 years old, buried long before the pyramids or ziggurats ever existed. Archaeologists say less than 5% of the site has been uncovered. Even that 5% changes everything, because the earliest enclosure they found was the largest, the most complex. Massive T-shaped pillars carved with lions, vultures, snakes, animals that don't belong together. And in the center, two towering figures facing each other, like teachers watching over a classroom of stones. Nobody knows who built it or why the builders later buried it by hand, perfectly preserved, like a time capsule from another world. On one pillar, the vulture stone, astronomers noticed something. A carving that matches the constellations in the sky around 10,950 BC, the exact window of the global flood in both Sumerian and Egyptian memory. So maybe this wasn't just a temple. It was a message left for whoever came next, a way of saying that we were here and we knew it was ending. And that would mean Sumer and Egypt didn't create civilizations. They were rebuilding it, because Gobekli Tepe looks less like a beginning and more like a restart button passed after catastrophe. If you want the full story of what was uncovered here in the carvings, the buried enclosures, the unanswered questions, watch our Gobekli Tepe deep dive after this one. And before we move on, if you haven't subscribed yet, then kindly click that subscribe button, because history is great and so should be that subscribe button. And if you haven't liked the video, please do. It's the easiest and free way to support us. Now we have seen civilizations that tried to remember. But what if one never forgot? This brings us to the oldest continuous civilization in the world, India. 7 sages appear in every culture, but only in India their story never faded. Here, they aren't myths. They are ancestors, the Sapta Rishis, the 7 sages who guided the world after the flood. Other civilizations talked about survivors. India remembered the system they rebuilt. The Shatpada Brahmana says when the water rose, Manu entered his boat, and the 7 rishis stood with him, carrying the seed of all living beings. Each rishi had a job. They weren't just holy men. They were specialists. Vishist, keeper of universal law, who restored Rata, the cosmic order. Atri, healer and timekeeper, who revived medicine and lunar calendars. Bhardwaj, the engineer, said to have written about flight and metallurgy. Vishwamitra, the astronomer, who mapped the heavens and gave the Gayatri Mantra built on the movement of the sun. Gautam, the thinker, who rebuilt philosophy and logic. Jamadani, the lawmaker, who re-established ethics and discipline. Kashyap, the biologist, who is called the father of all species in these texts. 7 teachers, 7 branches of civilization: law, medicine, engineering, astronomy, philosophy, ethics, and life sciences. Everything a world needs to start again. But India adds another twist. The Vishnu Puran says that these 7 sages change with every cycle of time. New sages for every new yuga. So the idea isn't flood, it's that humanity keeps resetting, and every reset has its 7 guides. And then there is the sky. The Mahabharata and Matsya Puran both say Saptrishi became stars, the 7 bright points of Ursa Major that circles the pole star every night. They never said, they are always visible, just like the knowledge that they stand for. And here's the part that most people miss. Around 10,000 BC, right at the end of Younger Dryas, when the ice melted and the sea rose, Ursa Major shifted its position in the sky. Because of Earth's slow wobble, what science called axial precession, the pole star and the north constellations move slightly every few thousand years. That shift changes which stars are used for navigation. In that exact period, Ursa Major became the new guiding group in the northern sky. So when the Purana says the rishis rose to the heavens, it might be the way of describing the movement when those 7 stars became the world's new compass. The only constant is a planet that was flooding and freezing at the same time. India didn't build monuments to remember that event. It remembered it through time itself, in calendars, in chants, in the stars above, in Rig Veda. While others recorded the floods as ending, India recorded it as a cycle, a reminder that knowledge must survive even when cities don't. Because every time the world resets, the 7 will return, and the pattern begins again. Every culture remembers a flood, but modern science now calls it by another name, the Younger Dryas Impact Event. So around 12,800 years ago, Earth was just leaving the Ice Age. Then something hit. Scientists found black mats of soot and nano diamonds across 4 continents, evidence of a massive cosmic impact. Temperatures crashed. Then almost overnight, the ice sheet melted. Sea level rose over 100 meters. Half the planet's coastline vanished beneath water. It was the Great Reset, the real one, the same window that Sumer remembers as the flood, the same time Egypt calls Zep Tepi the first time, the same era the Indian texts describe as end of Yuga. Different names, one event, the moment human history restarts. The Vishnu Puran describes these cycles precisely. The universe expands, collapses, resets, and begins again. Each age ends with the fire or water, and a handful of souls survive to rebuild it. Not apocalypse, recalibration. Geology agrees. Ice core data from Greenland show a sudden melt pulse around 10,900 BC, the exact layer where the Younger Dryas began. In that chaos, whole ecosystem vanished, but pockets of humans survived: highlands, plateaus, sacred mountains. That's where the stories of seven sages began. So maybe the flood wasn't a single disaster. Maybe it was a part of Earth's cycle, a natural reset that wipes the surface clean, but leaves memory in fragments, in stones, in myths, in stars. And if every reset brings new sages, new knowledge, new beginning, then the question isn't whether it has happened before. It's when it will happen again. And just like silence after the storm, somewhere between myths and history, survivors carried the spark forward. They rebuilt, they remembered, and somewhere maybe they kept the last fragment of the world alive. The Sumerians had a name for that place. They called it Dilmun, a land untouched by death, a paradise of survivors. Maybe it wasn't heaven at all. Maybe it was real. And that's what is still waiting to be found. And if you haven't really checked our video on Dilmun, go and check it out. Because this is no longer a story. It is a record of a surviving city carved in clay tablets. And before you go, if that subscribe button is still red, turn it gray. Because history isn't black and white. It's waiting to be rediscovered. And if you're a parent or even someone who cares about how kids grow today, take that 1-minute survey after this video. Click the link in the description and fill it out. No data, no signups, just your thoughts. Because if ancients rebuilt the world after the flood, maybe we can help rebuild the inner world for the next generation. This is Harry signing off. Stay curious.